Morning, everyone. My Vice President, Professor Lee Kil-ryang, Professor Myung-Jin Kim, and Chairperson, Professor Yoon Kyung-sun, Professor Kil-ryang Lee, and my dear colleagues and friends. It's a matter of great pleasure that I'm here, and I'm thankful to Professor Lee for having invited me. Louder? I'm grateful to Professor Lee for having invited me to this conference. It was a bit surprising because generally in India, so far, we haven't worked much at the university level on cyber and teaching of languages, as you will see when I will proceed with the course of my talk. But today I definitely would like to focus on two things. The first thing that I have in mind is the signing of the CEPA between India and South Korea. And this signing opens up immense potentialities for both the countries. And particularly, Korea has been developing using information technology for teaching of languages, whereas we have been slightly behind schedule. So we have been still in the other modes, which I will show you. So this could be another area of collaboration and cooperation. The title, Teaching of English in India, and the need for computer-assisted language teaching. Before we proceed, I would definitely like to tell you something about the situation of language in India, particularly in the context of education. Our world is very different from Korea, different from the West, typical South Asia. You see, for centuries, we've never had our mother tongue as a language of education. In the beginning, it was Sanskrit, and with the coming of the Muslim rule in 1000 AD, it was Persian, and after the middle of the 19th century, when the British rule set in, it became English. So we always deal with more than one language. It's a multilingual country where people speak more than one languages. So language for intellectual activity has been different from our language of personal use in family domains and other domains of social life. In the beginning, of course, when India became independent, there was a tussle whether English should be retained or whether it should be replaced by a native language, most widely spoken, Hindi. Well, today the position is very different. English has come to stay. There is no way out. There was a tussle for the first 30 years, but that's gone and past. It is the dominant language of education, and it is today the most significant language which functions in different domains of life like education, administration, defense, judiciary, industry, and so on. And also, it's viewed as a means of upward social mobility because the best jobs in India today go to people who are fluent in English, who speak good English, who write good English. We have a very high, very large education sector, perhaps next only to China and the USA in terms of student enrollment. I will give you the enrollment figures and you will be surprised. Then we have excellent world-class institutions like the IITs, the Indian Institutes of Technology, the Indian Institutes of Management Studies, the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, and many more institutes and departments in universities which are doing wonderful work in the English medium, through the English medium. Now, one thing which is my focus is, as far as the upper middle class is concerned, they have access to good English medium schools, and they can acquire English very easily within 10 or 12 years of their schooling life. But my focus is on those largely dispossessed people who learn English for 3 years or maybe 5 years and cannot speak. And therefore, in the competition for jobs, they lag behind. They are at a disadvantage. So they are my focus when I'm talking about the use of need for computer-assisted language teaching or learning. It is these people that I have in mind who cannot go to good classrooms. Okay, so the talk would be on the following lines: the relationship between language and education in India, the linguistic profile of the country, which you must know, which is very different from Korea, very different from this part of the world, the nature of multilingualism, which essentially is part of the country's linguistic profile, attitudes towards English presently, the language policy, and the monolithic educational structure, the huge structure, and the role that computers and the internet can play in achieving the unachieved goals still today. Coming to the linguistic profile, well, the 2001 census shows that India population is more than 1 billion, and it increases at the rate of 1.6% per annum. So you can calculate it must be about 1.16 billion by now. The 1961 census tells us that we have 1,652 mother tongues. Mother tongues. And these can be classified into 193 classified languages, which have a large number of speakers, and 67 languages are used for educational purposes. From 1971 onwards, the census discontinued the definition of the mother tongue for census purposes. So they began to look at language used in the household, language used at home, which could be different from the mother tongue. So the figures never came like that. Although they said that there are 3,000 or 10,000 or 7,000, but ultimately the classified languages were very few. 105 in 1971 with more than 10,000 speakers. I must tell you that there are certain languages with very few speakers, as even 100. They are on the verge of extinction. There's a census for 1991 states on the basis of language used at home that there are 114 main languages. Now, only in the 1991 census did the government ask for whether people know another language. So far they only asked the mother tongue. Now they said another language, second one, and a third one, 3 languages. And because people entered 3 languages for the first time, one could calculate and tabulate on the basis of census records that there is multilingualism in India. The figures can show that, and Khubchandani has done it. The national average for bilingualism has been increasing according to the census reports, from 9.7% in 61 to 13.04% in 71, 13.34 81, and 19.44 in 91. These figures are highly underrated, because one could ask for the 4th language or the 5th language and they would be there. And then one would really get what the actual picture is. And also the overall bilingualism with English, mother tongue and English or another tongue and English, is far ahead of bilingualism with Hindi. Now the most characteristic feature of the subcontinent, whether it's Bangladesh, whether it's India, primarily India, Pakistan too, that there is a societal allocation of roles. That is, we need not use one language all the time. We use the language as the need arises. For example, at home I speak Punjabi. When I go to the marketplace, I speak Hindi. If I go to the old city of Delhi, Jama Masjid, meet my Muslim friends, I speak a variant of Hindi which is called Urdu. And in the classroom, I lecture in English. So every day I use 4 languages. And then I have a smattering of Persian. When I go to the Persian department, speak some Persian, and go to the Italian department, speak some Italian. So it doesn't make any difference, and maybe after 2 months I'll speak some Korean too. My colleague, old Professor Pandit, who was head of our department and passed away in 86, he gave a good example of a Gujarati businessman in Mumbai. He uses Gujarati at home, Marathi in the marketplace, because Mumbai is part of Maharashtra, and Hindustani at the railway station. Kutchi in the spice trade is a merchant of spices, and the language used is Kutchi. And with his children he speaks English, and he watches the cricket matches and listens to the commentary in English, and sees English films also. So we use so many languages in our daily life. So it's not a surprise for us. It's normal for us. To be a monolingual would be highly stupid in India. To be a multilingual would be to be normal. So we have different kind of a yardstick. Now coming to English, it has been seen that it has been used as an auxiliary language, as a supplementary language, as a complementary language, as an equative language, depending upon how much English one needs. For example, auxiliary, suppose there's a student of Sanskrit. The student of Sanskrit need not speak English, but needs to go to the library and consult books. So once the student consults books, so there is some knowledge of English the person has, for library purposes. So English is performing an auxiliary function, and it's a library language, and it's a kind of a passive bilingual. Then we have a supplementary function. For example, students, they do their work in Hindi, but some subjects like mathematics and science they study in English. We have many streams of many kinds of schools. Government schools are Kendriya Vidyalaya. Now the Kendriya Vidyalayas teach in the local medium, but the science subjects and mathematics are in English. So they need English for subjects. That's the second variety. The third one is when it performs a complementary function, like we use English in the classroom, but elsewhere we use another language. Or when I meet people from south of India, if they don't understand Hindi, then we speak English. So we have to talk. So it functions as a link language. And finally, the equative function, when we have highly educated Indians living abroad who come to India, they can easily alternate between English and the Indian languages in all domains of social life. Now the attitudes towards English, as I told you, are very positive. We conducted a study some years back, and we found that English is the most desired medium of education. Mind you, only education, not for westernization of other things. And of course the mother tongue is preferred as an identity marker. Another work by my colleague Agnihotri and Khanna, they have also come to the same conclusion, that more than 90% informants want English in education. And it's seen as it has an instrumental function, it gets people good jobs. There can be no progress in science and technology if there is no English. This is one of the reasons why English remained in India, otherwise it would have gone. And another colleague of ours, Professor Kaul, even he has come to the conclusion that it is needed primarily as a medium of instruction at the secondary and for higher education. Coming to language policy, as I told you that the country had a lot of options. In 1950, when the Constitution was adopted, it was stipulated that English would function as an official language only for 15 years, up to 1965. After 1965, Hindi was supposed to take over all the functions of English. But then, India being what it is, it's a land of paradoxes, we're a paradoxical situation. People began to fight. It's a democracy. We've never had military rule. So we fight very often. A lot of political debate. That's why we don't make much progress, because we keep fighting. That's one reason POSCO couldn't establish itself, we keep fighting. Of course, we'll get to our solutions as well. Being a democracy, we will get our solutions, maybe later, not sooner. So there were problems between South India and North India and between West Bengal and North India. People thought that Hindi would be forced, will become first language, would become official language, and they do not know Hindi. So they would be at a disadvantage in getting jobs. So they raised a hue and cry. And there was a lot of political fighting, and some people even burned themselves. So in 1963, Nehru, the then Prime Minister, he gave an assurance that English would not be removed as long as all the states did not ask for it. So if all the states agree that we don't want English, it will go. Till then, it will remain. So the constitution was amended, and we have the Official Language Amendment Act of 1967, which makes English as the associate official language of the Union, with Hindi as the official language of the Union. So states which have Hindi as the language, they correspond with each other in Hindi. But non-Hindi speaking states correspond with the central government and with other states in English. And within their own regions, they use their own language. Then for education, we had the Kothari Commission, the Education Commission of 1964-66, which gave the glorious three-language formula. The whole teaching program of India was based on the three-language formula. Of course, now even that has been undermined. According to the three-language formula, the first language to be studied must be the mother tongue or the regional standard. Since one cannot give education in all the mother tongues, like lack of funds, so maybe the nearest dominant language as well. So right in the beginning, when a student gets admission in an elementary class or a primary class, the student has to have education in the mother tongue or the regional standard. Then after 3 or 4 years, a second language is introduced. The second language could be Hindi or English, anyone. And after another 2 or 3 years, a third language would be added. If English was the second language, then Hindi would be the third. If Hindi was the second, then English would be the third. So every student has to study some amount of English. And of course, we have always been dithering on this issue, whether all the reports, many debates have taken place. Most of the committees have come to were of the opinion that we should use our own languages for higher education and school education. And we should leave English and leave it only for specialized purposes. However, things did not happen. And the Ramamurthy report in 1990 very clearly points out that teachers have been educated so well in English that they cannot express themselves so well in other languages. So teachers would like to continue with English. And the students also want English because there are no equivalent programs in their mother tongues. The quality of the education in the mother tongue is not as good as it is in English. Then the growth of English language can also be traced according to the educational survey. Schools treating English as first language, only 0.6% of the rural primary schools, 2.8% of the rural high schools, and 9.9% of urban high schools. English is offered as a second language by 51% of rural primary schools, 55% of urban primary schools, 57% of rural high schools, and 51% of urban high schools. That's a very high number, keeping in mind the student population. The third language, 5% of rural primary schools, 21% of urban primary schools, and 44% of rural high schools, 41% of urban high schools. Anyway, these figures are not important. What is important is that the mindset is changing. Let me tell you, even today, no government document will ever give any data regarding English. You look up the annual report of the Government of India, they will mention what steps they have taken for the improvement of Hindi, what steps they have taken for the improvement of Sindhi, for Urdu, for Persian, for Arabic, but never English. So it's a political issue. So far the governments have shied away by having a look at English or even trying to promote English. So English has got itself promoted on its own because of the efforts of the middle class and because the government could not remove it, so some funding had to be given. So the Central Institute of English and Foreign Languages, Hyderabad, was created primarily for furtherance of English language, but even that has been converted into a university. It is an English and Foreign Languages University, so even that function is gone. However, despite the lack of government patronage, English is there where it is today, and I would like to give you 2 examples. A recent survey of National University of Education, Planning and Administration tells us that enrollment in the upper primary section of English medium schools has risen by 74% within 2004 and 2006. And in Hindi it rose by 24%. So English has far more rise. Let me tell you, English was never popular during the British regime. Alright, it's in post-independent India that English has picked up. So English is here with us not because it's a colonial legacy anymore. It was a colonial legacy, but we are using it for our own purposes in our own way. And therefore you also have a variety called Indian English. So we have no standard variety. We do not teach any standard English in India. Although people believe that the British accent is the best, yet it doesn't matter. Any English, as long as it is comprehensible, it is good enough. So English is taught by all kind of teachers in schools with all kind of accents. It can be Punjabi English, Pinglish, Hindi accent English, Tamil accent English, Bengali accent Benglish, and so on, doesn't matter. As long as we can understand each other, it's good enough for us. Also, very surprising, the government of Maharashtra, this is the first official by some state government, they have provided 20% reservation for teachers of English, because they said that there is a lot of globalization going on, a lot of industrial activities coming up, a lot of call centers are coming up, and they need English. And there is no English in Maharashtra. There is hardly any English at the ground level, grassroots level. By grassroots level, I mean the government schools, the schools where children of poor people go. There is hardly any English, and they cannot come up. So for them, so that in government schools, in ordinary schools where the fees is very, very low, or where there is no fees, there 20% seats be reserved for teachers of English, for graduates who have trained in English. So the thing has begun. And I remember in Kashmir, a gentleman contested an election, and he said that if he wins election, he'll open English medium schools. So some things in politics have come, but yet at the government level, nothing. It's like the Sphinx. Now look at the large size of the educational profile of India. I'm referring to the annual report of 2007-2008. The following data emerges. Primary schools, you can see the figures. So how much does it come to? 771,082. Middle schools, 288,199. Secondary, higher secondary schools, 154,032. Colleges, 1,549 general, 4,999 professional education. Universities, about 400, and other institutes of higher learning. Enrollment, now look at how many students are enrolled as per government records. These are enrollment in recognized schools by the government. If there are unrecognized schools, well, therefore those figures are not here. And there are many, many unrecognized schools as well. So primary level, you can see how much it is, how many millions there are. Over 130 million. Over 130 million studying in primary school in India. Over 51 million upper primary school. So you can see the figures. They go to millions. So this is what I wish to address. How can we approach? How can these people have access to English, good English? That's where I think the computer-related education will come handy. The number of teachers also, they run into more than 2 million primary school teachers, more than 1.5 million upper primary, more than 1 million secondary and higher secondary teachers, more than 1 million teachers like us in the universities. So it's a huge educational system, huge educational structure. The funds go towards paying the salaries. So there's hardly any money left for infrastructure. Hence, the things are very slow. Now look at the kind of teacher training that is there for pre-service and in-service. For pre-service, 846 teacher training colleges and about 1,609 teacher training schools, and we can train not more than 160,000 for 13 per year. The requirement is much more. So the trained teachers are few. And at present, the national average of trained teachers is 86%, 87%, 89%, 90% at different levels, at the primary, middle, secondary, and higher education levels. In-service is very important, we know that, for upgrading skills. And the government planned that people would be able to get in-service training of 2 or 3 months once in 5 years. Even this has not been possible. This has not been achieved despite the State Council of Educational Research and Training, despite district institutes of education and training, despite teacher training colleges, schools educational boards, English language teaching centers, private institutions, all of them chipping in. Still that figure was not met. Because how can you cater to over 1 million teachers, 3 million teachers, 4 million teachers and give them in-service training? So there was a program of mass orientation which meant training only for 10 days, which was hardly anything. Then there was a CBSE project with the help from UK, British Council, which actually is the teaching program at the 11th and 12th, 9th and 10th classes. The CBSE project began in 1989 and completed in 1997, and it led to the creation of textbooks, curriculum, and teacher training programs, packets, INSET program, in-service teacher training, and it focused on the communicative approach to language teaching, and the communicative approach has been attempted to be introduced at the school level. But let me tell you that there is no testing facility for listening and speaking skills at the 12th or at the 10th board exams. It's only reading and writing. So all listening and speaking skills are taken care of in internal assessment. That's all. That's where computer-assisted language would come handy. Then we've been using the distant mode of education. And Indira Gandhi National Open University has been the one which has taken the lead. And it's been connected to 24-hour satellite-based educational TV channels known as Gyan Darshan. There are 6 channels which operate, and they perform different functions. I've given the 6 names. Gyan Darshan is on the DTH mode. Gyan Darshan 2 is an interactive channel, slight typing error. It is for telecounseling, telelecturing, and teletraining. Gyan Darshan is Eklavya, technical education, and Gyan Darshan 4 for curriculum-based higher education. And there are 40 FM channels, and there is Gyan Bharati channel as well. See, all these are used for educational purposes throughout the day. Still, this is less. So despite all national teleconferencing, discussions about academic and infrastructure problems, we are discussing them, but still the numbers are so large, it's very difficult to meet the numbers. NCERT has produced a number of audio and video educational programs on school curricula, and they are transmitted, but it is very less, far less. Not all schools have televisions. Therefore, these programs become useless. They are available to about 60 to 70% of the population. Yes, they are, but not more than that. Now there is a focus in the last few years on information technology, and that's what made me accept Professor Lee's request that I also think about it, because we are also thinking on these lines. So far, even we have not done anything about language education in terms of information technology, but the time has come. Because to have that, we need to have the facilities, we need to have the infrastructure. As long as the infrastructure is not there, it is futile to even talk about those. So we've been working on the on the satellite mode, television, traditional distance education programs, and so on, using the radio, but not the computers because they were not there. But now they are coming in a big way. So a revamped scheme regarding information and communication technology is coming up, and is in progress in schools with the help of government, with the help of private partnership now. Thank God the government has begun to listen to private partners as well. And the scheme is to provide computer-aided education and information and communication technology literacy with broadband connectivity in about over 100,000 secondary and higher secondary schools. And there is a proposal to launch the National Education Mission, through the National Education Mission, broadband connectivity for all the universities in India. We have broadband connectivity, yes, our universities have, but we are not interconnected yet. So we will all be interconnected within a couple of years, and even 20,000 colleges, undergraduate colleges, will also be linked up. So gradually things have begun to pick up now. So now is the time when we can think of computer-assisted language teaching programs. So the aim is to make available high quality e-content and disseminate. And another program which has come up, which took off 2 years back, is called Sakshat. It's a one-stop educational portal, free of cost. It's being developed by inputs from the universities, from Kendriya Vidyalaya, from National Council of Educational Research and Training, from National Institute of Open Schooling, and by non-government organizations. They're all participating, and this is a resource which can be used free of cost by anyone. And it intends to cater to the learning needs of 500 million students. So, keeping this in mind, that since we have come this way, since computers are now just on our doorsteps, since the internet connectivity is very much there, it's coming, it will spread up. This is the only way that far-flung areas can also be reached in India. And the existing programs, like CALL, you have your CALL programs here, we can modify them for our Indian conditions. And with proper infrastructure, the virtual classroom can reach millions simultaneously. It can help focus on the development of reading, writing, listening and speaking skills, because listening and speaking skills have been ignored, largely ignored in the classroom. Indians are very good in reading and writing. You will find Indians everywhere. They can write excellent research papers, do very good work, but listening and speaking skills are lacking. So what one can do is, one can make a beginning, as you do in your language teaching programs. The computer is one way in which one can connect with so many, and use it in positive way with so many. You can have a proficiency test for so many, classify and categorize so many, which is not possible today. By the television program we cannot do it. With the radio program we cannot do it. But with the internet it becomes possible to identify different levels of learners and to give them, to create different kinds of programs. It's possible. So one could look at different kinds of learners like beginners, low beginners, high beginners, low intermediate, high intermediate, low advanced. One can make divisions, not these, maybe some others. It doesn't matter. Depending upon the feedback, we can classify our kind of learners and then create programs and implement them. And one more thing, the elder generation does not like to go to school. So the computer is a big thing. The young and old all can participate. So age factor doesn't become a bar. And also, once the children are using computers in remote areas of India, the computer-related skills will be enhanced. Let me tell you about a small experiment that was conducted in a very remote village in India, where literacy rate was very low. A computer with internet was installed. Children of the age of 6 or 7 were told how to use it. And that's all. Within a month they were able to get around and they knew much more. And they could handle the internet and they could do it through Hindi. And Hindi is one of the languages of the net now. So they were able to get a lot of information. So children can become computer friendly very quickly on their own. So little bit of input is necessary, that's all. So if we can bring in computers in a big way, then computer related skills will improve and these rural kids will get better jobs as well. And then of course we can use it as for our teacher training, pre-service and particularly in-service teacher training. Because the television mode doesn't work much, nor does the radios. So this is one way where one can connect whenever one wants. The television you have to listen at a particular time. But this in-service programs, if they're available on the internet, they can be accessed at the time whenever the teacher wants. And also authenticity can be created virtually. Authentic real-life situations for individual and group work or for role plays, one can create those kind of situations for language learners, English learners, Hindi learners, all kind of language learners. And of course, focus need not be on grammar at all. It should be on conversation. And the teacher, naturally the role of the teacher, which today is one, in our classrooms, the teacher speaks and the students listen. There's hardly a dialogue. So once we have some interactivity, the teacher needs to become a facilitator, just give guidance, and the student should be able to explore on her or his own. And of course, the programs available on the computer are enough to take care of spelling problems, so that student doesn't struggle with spelling. There are better things to do, like speak and listen. So software needs to be created. I think that's where we will seek help from Cyber Hankook University, maybe, and some other places, so that we can have the programs, we can have collaborations, so that we can create our own programs. Because let me tell you, in India, if an American was to go and teach in villages, nobody would listen to him. They would laugh. Or anywhere else. They listen to us because we can speak their idiom. So I can speak in their accent as well. So they listen to us more, and we are more easily accessible. So if English needs to make headway in India, it is through the Indian teacher that it will make a headway. And of course, there's a very small shift between our own accents and higher accents, better accents, native-like accents. If one needs to go ahead, if one needs to go at an international level, we need it. If one doesn't want to work at an international level, we don't need it. So it's good enough. So we need to create programs. There are programs available from private parties, but not convincing ones. I've seen some, not good. So anyway, these are certain musings that one can introduce at different stages, give different kinds of input, from lexicon, from simple words at the earlier stages, to phrases and clauses, and later on to better expressions, culture use-based expressions, user-based expressions, socially relevant expressions, and so on. And go on to even introducing films and TV programs. So there could be a graduated way of developing the programs for teaching languages, whether it is English or whether it is an Indian language. We can create these programs. We know now that it can be done, and it can be implemented within 1 or 2 years. So once the learners learn and use the internet, the whole world can be brought into the teaching program, into the teaching process. The classroom becomes, the home becomes the classroom. The school becomes the whole world is part of the school now. So things are just at a click of a mouse. So that's what will empower the students and give them greater information and learning techniques. And the focus, of course, need to be on assignments and on nothing else. I would like to close down here because I've already taken more time. I hope I've been legible and you've been able to, intelligibly been able to understand what I say. I will give this in writing to Professor Lee sometimes so that he can circulate it to you. And well, my idea was only to expose you to the world of English in India and what problems we have and how we can resolve them. And I think computer education is one big answer to our problems. Thank you.